So slow wave sleep, it is that period of sleep where you wash the poisons and toxins from your system. You allow your heart to rest, you reset your baseline blood pressure and heart rate, and you rinse your brain, to put it bluntly.
What can people do to try and, for themselves, rebuild some kind of sleep health? Welcome to Make Visible, the podcast shining a light on complex chronic illness. I am your host, Emily Kate Stevens. Welcome back to Make Visible. This week, Jez and I are bringing you an interview with David Joffe, a sleep medicine and respiratory physician in Sydney, Australia, and it is all about the strategies for sleep. So it's a really practical episode. Let's start. Jez, how did you sleep last night?
Within the spectrum of my sleep these days, it was probably just about in the top half.
Ooh.
It wasn't brilliant. But I mean, my sleep has not been great for the last 5 or 6 years. And I'm sure that is something that is a familiar story to other people out there suffering with long COVID. We had a study published by Stanford in October that showed just how widespread sleep disturbance was in long COVID. There's very many reasons for it, which we can go into. But yeah, I struggle with it. And there are many things I have to do to give myself the best possible chance of not having a shocker. How about you, Emily? What was your night like?
It was actually pretty good. I would say not long enough. I do have a tendency to wake quite early in the morning, and I probably went to bed too late. But for me, sleep, getting sleep, working out how I can sleep has been an absolute game changer in my health. I had such horrendous insomnia for the first 18 months, constant. I really, really could not find sleep. And I'd say around 2.5, 3 years in, I began to get a handle on it. And you can feel the upward trajectory as you begin to actually implement some strategies for your sleep, because it's not just something that you can take for granted. It's not just something that happens when you have so much dysregulation going on in your body.
Sleeping well isn't going to cure your long COVID, but it might significantly improve your quality of life, because of your symptom burden, you might find that maximizing the quality of sleep you are able to maximize given the condition might give you a 25% improvement in your symptoms.
Yeah.
So it's one of the quickest low-hanging fruits to grab. Although that being said, it would be nice if the fruit was right here. It's still up there. Some of the stuff you had to do is still a bit annoying, but I'm sure we're going to go into that.
And it's not necessarily the quickest if it's taken you 6 years of trying to work out how to do it. But it's definitely that feedback loop, I believe. That I think across the board in these conditions can be said for multiple things. It's that if you can slightly increase your sleep quality or your sleep quantity, it slightly increases your daytime energy, which just has this knock-on effect all the way through. So let's go to David Joffe, who is vice chair of the World Health Network Long COVID Advisory Group. And he approaches sleep as someone who has spent 40 years studying people with sleep disorders and respiratory disorders. And here he gives us some straight up, no nonsense, practical advice on how we can improve sleep. What can people do to try and, for themselves, rebuild some kind of sleep health despite the hit?
So there are the simple things that we've long advocated for, which include what we sort of generically refer to as sleep hygiene. So that's going to bed at the same time and getting up at the same time, irrespective of work or weekends, switching off devices, making sure the room is dark, making sure that the room is quiet, making sure that the temperature isn't too high, because you need to initiate a drop in core temperature. So if your central heating, terribly English, is a bit too high, you can't initiate sleep properly. So these are all things that are crucial. Is the environment of sleep ideal? And then there are strategies again, behavioral things to deal with and manage the other aspect of it, which is what we tend to refer to as more sort of sleep anxiety, the worrying about going to sleep. And for many, it becomes a kind of perseverative and intrusive thing. And the overlap with mood is separate and certainly needs to be addressed. But for many, whether it is meditation, whether it is white noise, whether it's counting sheep, whatever rocks your boat, but something that basically enables you to develop a relationship between bed as a place of rest and not a place of war. And so it's really important for people to avoid, particularly those who've got a lot of PEMS, not to spend that time where they are inactive and they're awake, but they are fatigued. Do that on the couch. Do that somewhere else. Don't do that in your bedroom, because that disassociates your cognitive recognition that bed is somewhere that you go to sleep. Really only two things you do in bed: sleep and sex, in whichever order you prefer. I will leave that entirely to the audience, but that's the essence of what we try and tell people. So that's the behavioral aspect, and they're really important. No late meals. You don't want reflux. Making sure that you haven't had excess alcohol. Avoid drugs of addiction, benzodiazepines, the Z drugs, zolpidem, zolpiclone, imivane. And now there's a whole bunch of orexin-based ones, but they also come with a price to pay, in that certainly a lot of people don't tolerate them terribly well, the orexin sedatives. And for some, they will get the intrusion of narcolepsy, because you literally are chemically making them, if you like, narcoleptic, excessively sleepy.
So it's really about creating this environment both in your room but in your body as well, to
Absolutely.
invite sleep at an appropriate moment, not at inappropriate moments.
That is absolutely crucial. And then there are the pharmacological approaches. So one of the aspects is, with the loss of circadian rhythm, is melatonin. I always prefer, particularly in long COVID, to use pharmaceutical grade, because I know exactly what's in it. It's approved by our TGA and it's slow release. And so you know exactly what its pharmacokinetics are, and it's low dose. The idea that some is good, more is better doesn't work. In fact, if you are taking bigger doses of melatonin, it can cause insomnia. So one has to be mindful of that. But pharmacological grade, slow release, 2 milligrams is what I use. And I tell people you really want to take it at 7 to 8 p.m. The essence of that is that it then biologically, its pharmacological peak is 9 to 10. That is our normal circadian peak. Every hormone and every enzyme in your body needs to know what time it is. So alcohol dehydrogenase, which breaks down booze, switches on at night, which is why you'll get more intoxicated if you drink at lunchtime, because the enzyme's not switched on. Your cortisol, which is your stress hormone from your adrenal gland, bottoms out at 3 o'clock in the morning. Now, your liver and your kidneys and your adrenals, they don't know what time of day it is. They take their cue from that atomic clock, which is your melatonin rhythm. And so melatonin is, if you like, the circadian timekeeper. And so every organ kind of looks and sets its watch according to that, as to when its enzymes and other processes undergo switching on, switching off, all that sort of thing. And so that is very useful for many, but again, best to use low doses. We also know that it has a role in REM behavior disorder. So again, in long COVID people, we're seeing a lot more of that. And so you're not really meant to be moving when you're in dream sleep. You're paralyzed in your voluntary muscles. And so when you lose the normal paralysis of dream sleep, that's not normal. And so that fragments your REM sleep, and that has implications in terms of information processing speed and memory. So circadian or slow release melatonin is a useful drug for reducing outbursts of REM behavior disorder. And then there are other medications that can be really, again, helpful. It's always imperative to do a sleep study in those with long COVID, because you are going to miss a lot we recognize that many have unknown or unrecognized sleep apnea. And so if you fix that, it's a bonus. We recognize that many, because of the DOPA injury, now have restless legs and have a lot of leg movements of sleep. But it's the only place that you can realistically measure how much slow wave sleep people are getting. And it's really not uncommon, and it's been measured, that there's a significant reduction in deep sleep in those with long COVID. And so I have been for some time now in long COVID patients. In essence, we put electrodes onto a forearm and a thumb muscle. So not exactly devastating science, but the signal, the electrical signal when you hit REM should just flatline. You shouldn't have muscular activity, should be paralyzed.
And what are you seeing in long COVID?
Well, what we're seeing plenty is the absence of paralysis in dream sleep. And for some, there are clearly on video associated movements. And so, yes, they have REM behaviour disorder. Many long COVID people have new onset restless legs. It's a real feature. That often responds to simple things, fixing their sleep disordered breathing, addressing their metabolic derangement, and making sure that there's not a metabolic cause is crucial. But magnesium is hugely helpful for restless legs. One in this day and age now has to be mindful. So I always use what hospitals use, which is something called Magnin, because it's got good bioavailability and it works. We're increasingly aware that the fad of wellness, opium merchants and sharks in the water, that a lot of the magnesium's got B6 in it. And so in desperation, the some is good, more must be better group will eat buckets of magnesium that's got B6 in it, and that's neurotoxic and can cause peripheral nerve damage. Not helpful if you've already got peripheral nerve damage from your long COVID.
Yeah.
So I always use stuff that's just magnesium, and the stuff that we use in hospital to replace magnesium. Bananas are high in magnesium and potassium. Magnesium is really helpful for restless legs. It's available at chemists. It's cheap. Magnesium is a core chemical that is crucial to how we produce dopamine. And so it's really important. And the fact is, if you do someone's serum magnesium, it doesn't tell you anything about what their CSF, their brain levels of magnesium are. So for many, they will get benefit even if someone says, but your magnesium levels
Magnesium's fine.
Yeah, magnesium's fine. Yeah, well, I don't adhere to that because I haven't measured in their spinal fluid, but it is a really helpful adjunct for many in terms of the restlessness and the fidgetiness that often pays off in the early evening is when they often get their restlessness. And again, that interferes with sleep initiation. The other thing, coming back to your question about things that can be helpful, there's a supplement called Glycine. If you'd asked me 5 years ago what I thought about oxaloacetate and chrysin and creatine monohydrate and stuff, I would have told you to get stuffed. But they are all of those things are part of my regular armamentarium for mitochondrial support for PEMS. In your brain, there are only two things that are really unbelievably mitochondrial dependent. Well, every cell has mitochondria except red blood cells, but muscle and your brain. That's where you really want to focus.
Glycine?
Yeah.
You also just mentioned creatine.
So for mitochondrial support, things like Medinger, which is oxaloacetate, is really helpful for many, and there is some work in that area. We often supplement it with things like CoQ10 and chrysin. For me, I tend to add those things because oxaloacetate in itself is quite expensive. For me, sometimes using cheaper things to, work adjunctively. It's all about a process in the mitochondria, which is the core component, which is the Krebs cycle. So there are many ways in which we make energy, but the Krebs cycle, now I've got to tell you that when people put up images of the Krebs cycle, to be honest, we all forgot that exactly 20 seconds after we walked out of Biochemistry 101 in first year medicine. But boy, I tell you what, I've had to go back and relearn that. And thankfully, we have one enormous human being in our group, a remarkable man, Leo Gallen, who has spent his life looking at Lyme, post-Lyme, chronic fatigue, post-viral illness. And his knowledge, Leo is never allowed to die, and he's certainly never allowed to retire until Leo has left his brain to us.
I actually spoke to him a couple of years ago, but I should probably revisit him for our audience just to highlight.
You should.
His work.
I mean, particularly so one of the joys of sitting at the grown-ups table is about every 6 weeks, one of the guys in the group, whether it's Rob Wuss or Mark Fay from Derby, or Dave Petrino or Leo or me, I'll talk about sleep, or Danny Beckman will show us these images of exploding neurons and vessels with aneurysms in them. We show each other unpublished data, stuff that others don't see yet. And so that's really, for me, being the greatest joy is that Australia is a backwater for long COVID. We have plenty of it. We just choose to ignore it. And so sitting with the guys who really are, like Amy Prohl and David, at the cutting edge of antiviral studies and other things, exercise testing, trying to filter out what we think drives the PEMS, the mitochondrial hijack, all that sort of stuff, is really, really important. But coming back to it, I got distracted. Glycine, 3 to 5 grams, it drops your core temperature. So it's really quite useful for initiating sleep.
Okay.
Cheap as chips. So 3 to 5 grams, probably 30 minutes before bed, it helps drop your core temperature. And that is one of the absolute catalysts for sleep. And so for years, the French used to use a rectal thermometer to measure the drop in core temperature. That's really where we got much of the science was from the French. That is a crucial thing, that we see that core temperature drop. And you're right, those who've got dysautonomia, that's yet another additional pathway over and above everything else. I saw a colleague of mine and I actually visited her at home because she was so buggered. And we stepped out of her house. She was coming to say goodbye to me. It was 30 degrees in Sydney and humid, and I touched her arm. It was freezing cold and she had goosebumps. And I said, yeah, that's just your dysautonomia.
Oh, that's so interesting. I didn't realize that. I am always cold, or have always been cold since I had long COVID.
Yep.
But I hadn't realized that was a symptom of dysautonomia.
Yeah, absolutely. The temperature, I mean, it's how we regulate our temperature.
Yeah, I definitely have problems with the regulation of it.
Absolutely. So you then also have to differentiate, particularly in women, those who are in that 40 to 50, 55 group who will go into early menopause. It's a crucial thing. For some, they go into early menopause. For some, it makes their perimenopause a whole lot worse. And so it's really important, because for some, benefit may be derived from hormone replacement therapy and other things. So never dismiss the obvious, that the flushing, the flashing, the sweating and other things, don't just ask just my dysautonomia, it may be just menopause. And that at least you can address. But having addressed that, even in those who are not clearly biochemically or otherwise menopausal, it's really a common feature, dysregulation of the temperature. It's pretty distressing for many. Their partners lying there freezing to death and with the air conditioning on, and they lie, and then Meduna's coming back on, and
I have it the opposite way. I have it the opposite way round. I'm absolutely freezing when I go to bed. Freezing. Yeah.
It's fascinating. There are so many things that fascinate me about this. 40 years of medicine, I've never seen anything that comes even close to it. So when people said this is a novel virus, it remains a novel pathogen. And the pathways to the endless hurt are just extraordinary. That's the problem.
There are obviously so many neurocognitive symptoms and all of the various cascade effects that you could actually put a lot of them down to the sleep fragmentation.
What we're talking about is the glymphatic system. So your body has a sewage system, which is the lymphatic system. So if you cut your arm and you get an infection, you'll get a big swollen gland under your armpit. That's what's supposed to happen. It's taking out the trash. The brain doesn't have that. The brain has a unbelievably complicated and really kind of beautiful way of taking out the trash, which we've called the glymphatic system because it's similar. But the glymph bit comes from glial cells. So in adolescents and in young people, the glial cells are really important. They actually help work out which networks of your brain you are going to want and need as you evolve to maturity. But we know that they also evolve, the glial cells are fascinating, but they actually become crucial to the brain's immune system. They are, in many ways, an integral part of the brain's immune system. They have extraordinary capacity to share mitochondria and do all sorts of absolutely fascinating things that we're only just beginning to appreciate. To be honest, the glymphatic system is really only a decade old or maybe a bit more, but the crucial component of it is that is when you take out the trash. And so
you're sleeping.
Yep. And so when we go into slow wave sleep, which is deep sleep, we actually pump noradrenaline, little tiny bits of noradrenaline, into the little arterioles that are feeding into the cortex to basically increase the pressure and flow across the glymphatic system. You have an arterial side that is pumping a bit harder and a venous side, which is, if you like, taking out the waste. And so we actually deliberately pump a bit harder noradrenaline into the glymphatics in slow wave sleep, which is when we wash our brain out.
And when does that slow wave sleep happen?
Well, the architecture of sleep is pretty damn rigid in normal humans. So we know that in infancy, we have more REM sleep because our brains are growing. We know that in adolescence, they have more slow wave sleep because that's when growth hormone is released. But by the time of maturity, sleep architecture is really pretty rigid. So we initiate sleep, and that in itself is a science.
That is also a challenge in some of these conditions.
There's nothing like dysautonomia to dysregulate your slow wave sleep, but also the prefrontal cortex that sits immediately above your nose. Well, the prefrontal cortex has a really important role. It's actually part of the motherboard. That's why the virus goes there and into your amygdala, which is also on the motherboard. But you actually need the prefrontal cortex to tell your frontal lobes to go to sleep. And so with prefrontal injury, you get a whole lot of insomnia and rumination because you can't switch the thing off. It's not like a computer that you can just reboot. And so the glymphatics are damaged. And so with a reduction in slow wave sleep, injury to the prefrontal cortex, in addition to which there's this kind of vascular microclotting component of hypoxic tissue injury, mitochondrial dysfunction. If you can't take out the waste, you will accumulate the proteins that you least want, folded amyloid and other things that are hallmarks of what we best understand as dementia. And so that is the thing that keeps guys like me awake at night.
Can you explain that in terms of the sleep architecture, once we actually initiate the sleep cycle, what phase do we go into initially?
So there's a very complicated process from the prefrontal cortex to a drop in core temperature to a cascade of a whole bunch of chemicals that I won't even begin to try and explain. It's so complicated. But we basically drop into initially transitional sleep where the EEG, which is what we've always used to score and record sleep, just starts to change in its pattern and frequency. And then we establish stage 1 sleep, and then we go into stage 2 sleep. Those are the essence of light sleep. From there, we actually descend into what we used to call stages 3 and 4. We now just call them N3, so they've kind of been grouped together. But that is the essence of slow wave or deep sleep. And in many ways, it's related to the fact that we shut off through the midbrain a pathway that is histaminergic. In essence, that means that it becomes like a brick wall so that no signals are really entering from the higher cortex and signals from the lower brain bounce back down. So you're kind of disconnecting your higher brain from your lower brain. So your heart still beats, you still breathe, your bowels still work. So the autonomic nervous system's still functioning.
But you're almost stopping the conscious side of the brain.
That's exactly right. And so that is really the essence of deep sleep, is a state of unconsciousness, if you will.
And that is the point at which this glymphatic system kicks in and you start to remove those proteins, those waste from your brain, essentially. And
in essence,
if
absolutely.
You don't go into that phase of sleep, you're not entering that cleaning process for your brain.
Yeah. Or if you are, it's really suboptimal. I mean, the glymphatics still work, but the crucial aspect is that is when they are most essential. So slow wave sleep is your heart rate drops, your blood pressure falls. It is that period of sleep where you wash the poisons and toxins from your system. You allow your heart to rest, you reset your baseline blood pressure and heart rate, and you rinse your brain, to put it bluntly.
I'm going to quote one of the things that David said there. He said that slow wave sleep, it is the point at which you wash the poisons and toxins out of your system. As someone, Jez, who has struggled with sleep, tell me how that statement, that sentence rang for you in your body. Because for me, that is what I feel. Like I have been perpetually poisoned. There's something in my system and I can't get rid of it. So if one of the things is that sleep is not ridding us of those toxins, sleep is a huge thing.
Sleep is clearly a huge thing. As humans, whether we're well or suffering with chronic complex conditions, we struggle without it. One of the characteristics of ME/CFS and now long COVID is unrefreshing sleep. Certainly my experience might be that by the time I go to bed, I'm just about okay and sort of feeling like not always the case this. Sometimes I'll be absolutely spanked. Other times I might be feeling okay. But almost always I wake up feeling terrible. I wake up feeling like I had 8 pints the night before.
Yeah, that kind of poisoning from alcohol.
Yeah, it's 100% what it feels like. It feels like concussion and a massive hangover all in one. And that's my morning every morning. And I've got used to it over the last 6 years. One of the things I have found is that feeling is at its least strong when I have managed to sleep the best. And there are certain things that I have had to integrate into my life and change the way I live and change the way I spend my days to give myself the best chance of sleeping better. And I don't know what sort of strategies you integrated into your life, but they start first thing in the morning. So it starts at 8 or 9 o'clock in the morning for me, how I prepare for that night's sleep. So it starts early.
So let's talk about some of those, and we can go back and reference some of those strategies that Joffe referred to. I think what you're talking about from 8 o'clock in the morning is, and sometimes I wanted to punch people in the face with advice that I was given. But people say, if you want to sleep, you need to manage your circadian rhythm. You need to get up and see the light, get daylight onto your body. And what I want to reference at this point is, and this actually goes back to something that Joffe said as well, the fact that it's a brilliant idea and it is essential, but there are people for whom that idea of getting daylight on them at 8 o'clock in the morning is absolutely horrific. I had days where I could not move from my bed because the pain was too bad, let alone turn a light on or move to the window to open the curtains. The idea of that light and that movement was just horrendous, and I absolutely couldn't physically do it. But once you are able, is this what you're talking about 8 a.m.? Yeah.
So my old patterns of waking up, I now try and have a very conscious overrule of my instincts. So my instinct from the old days was always, first thing you do, reach for your phone. Now, I try and make it at least half an hour before I even reach for my phone. And in a perfect world, I probably ought to charge the phone overnight in a different room, but I haven't quite got that far. But yeah, I do breathing exercises because normally I wake up pretty early around 6 or something, and it's not light at that point. I will continue to do breathing exercises until there's enough daylight to justify opening the curtain. Open the curtain for 10 or 15 minutes once there's some daylight to come through, and only at that point will I let myself get my phone. Then once I'm up and I've gone downstairs, first thing I do before I put the coffee on, open up the back door, go outside and stand in the garden for even just 20 seconds at that point, just to get some light on me. Personally, I find the intermittent type of fasting difficult, and I find that my circadian rhythms are at their best when I eat and have some coffee in the morning. So that's generally what I tend to do early-ish. Once I've done that and once I'm up and showered, generally feeling pretty awful, but differently awful than I did first thing, I'll then take myself out for a 3-minute walk up the road and back, maybe 200 yards, just so I've been outside and got some daylight on me and moved my body a little bit. And I'll come in, sit down, have a lie down for a bit, do some more breathing exercises, and then I'll consider getting on with my day. But all of that faff in the morning, I used to set an alarm and be out of the house within 20 minutes. Bang, everything's done, and I'm just do. Now that process of being ready to do something takes about 2 hours. But yeah, that's kind of how I've got to do it.
And do you wake up with an alarm at 6 a.m?
No,
or is it?
I haven't used an alarm in 5 years now.
Yeah, my body likes to wake up at about 6 a.m. And just as you do, I lie in the dark and do my breathing exercises every morning. And if I don't, actually, I can feel it in my body. If I have to rush or have to get up without having had that time, I can feel it. It's interesting because our conversation has started to prepare for the end of the day, for that sleep. You start at the beginning of your day because it's this constant cycle. And some of those points on sleep hygiene that Joffe made are absolutely imperative. I think, especially when you are bedbound or spending a lot of time in your bed, there's such a tendency to then be on your phone in bed and think it's not making a difference and think, oh, well, but that's my connection with the outside world. But actually shutting that down and not having that, either whether it's blue light or just the mental stimulation of what you're absorbing, I think has huge implications for actually the depth of your sleep, which, as we heard, is incredibly important. Now, Joffe said, I loved this phrase. He said that we should try to develop a relationship with bed as a place of rest and not a place of war. And for me, that really, really rang true because I spent so many years pretty much doing everything in bed. And it really did become the place of everything, a lot of the time because I couldn't get downstairs. But then it just almost became a habit, like it was my safe place. So if I was sitting up in bed working, now in retrospect, I'm thinking, could I have made that shift and at least gone to a different place, a different room? Because I like that idea of creating some kind of sanctuary where you are making bed as your place of rest. However, again, there are going to be people listening to this who can't get out of bed, who are bedbound.
This is the cruelty of the condition, right? For the people who are suffering severely, all of the things that you could/should do that might improve your quality of life, you simply cannot do. And you are stuck within this maze of mirrors where everything that you try and do, there is no escape and any sort of route out. I mean, I love my random movie references, but I don't know if you remember the start to The Man with the Golden Gun, James Bond movie. But it's this maze of mirrors that Bond gets lured into by Scaramanga, right? That's kind of like the place you're in when you're severe or you've got severe PEM. There is no escape from this place. All you can do, everything that you do is reflected back on you, and there's no way of getting out because all the things that you'd want to do, all the ways out, aren't available. And there isn't really a huge amount of advice one can give to people who are in that scenario other than just offer compassion and say, I've been there briefly at times over the last 6 years and it's brutal.
Yeah. Yeah. So I wanted to acknowledge that. I like this idea of creating your bed as a place of rest, but let's acknowledge that for some that is not possible. If you can, though, it's a really great strategy because now when I talk about my relative wellness now, I never want people to feel like I am in any way boasting or in any way not understanding what other people are going through. But I do hope that sometimes it might offer people some hope because it is not a completely random thing. It has taken me 6 years of work and still daily work to get to this place. So I'm just trying to share some of the strategies that have helped for me. And really the marked difference now is that I don't spend my days in my bedroom. And for at least 4 years, I spent every day in my bedroom. That was my world. Let's talk about some of those other things that Joffe mentioned. Melatonin, fan, fad or fail. Have you experienced melatonin? What are your thoughts on it? And do you think it's something that has the backing?
Well, the science seems to suggest so, doesn't it? I used to take melatonin in the old days. When I was traveling, it was great for jet lag. I would take about 0.2 of a milligram at the time. And I found that really made a difference to helping your body adjust to whatever time zone you're in. And I used to do a lot of travel with work. There was a lot of cross-Atlantic and flying east and all sorts. I found it really helped then, but I tried not to take it every night. Situation's changed a bit. Now it's one of the things that I lean on most heavily. The current pills I'm taking are 10 or 12 milligrams. There's a few things I take at night before I go to bed. It would be up there in the top 2 that I most heavily rely on, or I feel like if I miss it, I got almost no chance of sleeping normally.
And for how long have you taken melatonin?
So I ramped it up in the very early days of long COVID. Especially when I was struggling with sleep, it seemed like a very sensible thing to increase. So I've been taking it constantly for 6 years now.
Melatonin is probably the thing that got me back to sleep. But unlike Joffe's recommendation, I did do the melatonin that you could buy because I was prescribed it by one doctor and I actually found that medical one to be ineffective. Whereas taking the 10 milligrams that you buy in the US, I found helpful. I have read things to suggest that actually we shouldn't be taking it long term because, as with anything, your body then develops this reliance on it, and a reliance on a chemically induced version of it means that you are less able to produce it yourself. And that plays into all of those supplements that Joffe referenced, because they're all things that we actually create or have innately in our body that we should be producing sufficient of to maintain that homeostasis, which goes back to what you and I are always wanting to know is, why are they all knocked out? Why are we not making enough of them in our bodies? And obviously that is a long conversation, and what we talk to pretty much every single person about, what's happened to knock that melatonin out. But in terms of that, the supplements do have a pretty good safety track. And I know a lot of people with these conditions are taking it.
That's the challenge. Should you really be taking this stuff long term? So I've been taking antihistamines long term. I've now been taking melatonin long term. A couple of other things I've been taking long term. And in a perfect world, I wouldn't be taking them. And I've tried to titrate down and get off each of them at some point to see if I can. And immediately I have suffered to a point where it's not the kind of suffering that you can just spend 2 or 3 days getting through and then you'll be fine. No, I'm actually quite reliant on them whilst I still am this symptomatic. At the point at which I'm better enough to start trying to come off them again, I will do.
Yeah.
But it's one of this hall of mirrors. You can't get out. I try not to take too many things on a day. There was a period where my supplements bowl and pills bowl was just so much stuff I was taking in. I'm like, this is no good. So when I went to do the extended fast, I went cold turkey on just about all of it. And that helped me break the pattern in a sense of taking a lot of those. And I only reintegrated the ones I really felt I absolutely needed.
And did you reintegrate them one by one? Because that's the thing.
I tried to, yeah.
Me right now, I still take a lot of supplements each day. And because I am in this period of relative wellness, I'm almost terrified to stop them because they have all been added incrementally, but I now don't know which ones I need and which ones I don't. I will say, and this comes on to his next big one, I really notice it if I don't take magnesium each day. Are you a fan of magnesium?
I'm a fan. Yeah.
Yeah. Do you take it every day?
I do. I take it as part of my bedtime ritual at about 8 o'clock.
And with the melatonin, what time do you take the melatonin? 8 o'clock?
8 o'clock. After listening to Joffe's interview, I might bring it a bit earlier, actually. I've generally been doing it an hour before bedtime. So my bedtime ritual starts at 8.
Tell me about that ritual. Tell me what you take and when you take it.
Well, let's zoom back to the morning. So I've gone and done my morning walk. I've come in and get through my day. It's possible I might have a second coffee sometime mid-morning, but rare. Certainly no caffeine after midday.
That's what I was going to say. What's your relationship been like with caffeine? Has it changed?
Yes, I used to have a coffee occasionally into the evening and not notice ill effects now, midday latest.
And the other thing, alcohol?
0.
Yeah.
Zero. I've been teetotal. I was a social drinker before and binge drinker on weekends, as everybody from Gen X was pretty much.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, not in 6 years.
I haven't either.
Yeah.
So no alcohol.
No alcohol, no caffeine after midday. Early dinner. So try and eat, if possible, by 6 o'clock and avoid sugar as well anytime in the afternoon too. That early dinner is one of the things that has made the biggest difference. I used to be able to eat and then go to sleep. Now, if I've eaten a meal 2 hours before, zero chance of my body going to sleep. And I can even see it when I was measuring my heart rate. For 2 hours after eating, my heart rate goes up like this and just takes forever to come down. So I have to eat at least 2 hours, preferably 3 before bedtime. So that's one part of it. Stop work at 6. That's the other part of it, because otherwise your brain's going. Again, didn't used to be so much of an issue. Now it is. So at 8 o'clock, I'll go upstairs. I'll take my nighttime pills, supplements and a couple of meds, and start doing breathing exercises at that point. And what I'll also try and do around that time is try and trigger what I sometimes call this sort of fatigue wave, which is a yawning fit that lasts about 10 minutes. And I force a couple of yawns, and then suddenly my body just goes into this crazy yawn cycle. And again, that appears to be a nervous system regulation mechanism that I'm able to trigger, and the heart rate drops at that point too. Until then, whilst I'm go during the day, or go crash, which is probably more accurate, I haven't maybe calmed the nervous system down to the point where it needs to be able to sleep. So triggering those yawns are quite important too.
Yeah, that's an activating of your parasympathetic.
There's one other point in here as well, which is a trick I sometimes use, but it's risky, and that's to have a hot bath. Hot baths are one of the things generally recommended for normal people to help with sleep, because after the hot bath, your body temperature drops, and your body temperature dropping and cooling down is one of the cues for sleep, as Joffe talked about. Unfortunately, along COVID, hot baths can be tricky because A, they're a cardiovascular workout, which is a good and a bad thing in long COVID. But two, depending on how dysautonomic you are, your body might struggle to cool down properly. So sometimes a hot bath will knock me out afterwards brilliantly. Other times I might be awake for 2 hours because the body won't cool down. That's something that might work for individuals, but I very much doubt is going to be an across the board.
If you have a hot bath, do you add Epsom salts, magnesium to the bath?
No, but I should.
Try?
Yeah, it would make sense to do so.
Yeah, I do occasionally do that, and I find that I do sleep really well with that. It's this dysregulation of temperature I really struggle with. I'm always freezing cold when I go to bed anyway. And actually, one of the things that stops me from sleeping is the fact that I feel so cold. I think it must be something to do with the way that my brain perceives that drop in core temperature as my body is trying to instigate that drop. I find it really uncomfortable. I have 5 duvets on.
But one of the other things is that people say you will sleep better if you have weight over you. So actually having like heavy blankets is actually a very good sleep cue for you.
Yeah,
too.
and I think for me, that is actually what it is. It's the weight. I should probably just get myself a weighted blanket. I don't like feeling airy. I like the room to be cold. I definitely do that.
Don't like a draft. Sneaking in under the duvet.
Exactly. So you tend to take an hour between starting to instigate the sleep cycle. And I think one of the things that is really important in what you're doing there, the meds and the supplements, sure, but it's this process that you are signaling to your body. This is our routine, just the same as you do with kids when you're teaching them. This is the routine. With kids, you have the bath, you read the story, and it is that wind down period. You're teaching your body, this is where we're going. In terms of that kind of routine or rhythmic thing, are you ever reliant on audio books, on certain hertz music, on meditations? Have you had experience of that? And are there any of those things that you bring into your routine?
So I tried some of the sleep meditations. I found they actually got my brain whirring more than they calmed it down, because as soon as I'm listening to words, my brain switches on. I will use calming music during the day when I take breaks, and occasionally at night as well. I find that's less stimulating than meditation type stuff. So yeah, I have tried it. It will certainly work for some people, but personally, it wasn't something I found too helpful. One
of my major strategies, and I think it's one of the things that literally saved me in the worst days, is yoga nidra. And for anyone that doesn't know, yoga nidra is not anything physical. It is a form of lying down and having a rest in your body that is not fully entering sleep necessarily, but you are creating this release of consciousness. You're sort of switching off your brain and going into this deep form of meditative rest. And I was reliant on that for years. In the middle of the day, I would do one of those, and it was so calming for my nervous system. I was also in that cycle of insomnia, so I was really, really struggling. And whilst I knew that I was tired, and believe me, I napped in the day a lot because sometimes it was almost like narcolepsy. I was so exhausted. But when I was trying to really, really get on top of this and regulate that circadian rhythm, so not take a 3-hour nap in the middle of the day, I would do yoga nidra, and it's sufficiently calming and refreshing that it would enable me to get through the afternoon. And then a lot of the time I would do, and I still do if I need it, yoga nidra or sleep meditations at bedtime, because I find, one, the actual content and focus, a lot of the time it will focus on your breathing or do a full body scan. And I find that focus on the internal, in the physical, enables me to detach from my mental busyness. But the other thing, and I know this from when I was a child, is I always as a child went to sleep listening to the same audiobook, not multiple different audiobooks, the same audiobook every night, again and again, if I could ever not sleep. Because I think, like Joffe says, counting sheep, sometimes I will go for a walk in my head where I will walk really, really familiar routes and notice things along the way. That to me seems like quite a mental process, but there's something in the familiarity of it. So there's this rhythmic thing that's induced in my body by going over old material, essentially. So I found one yoga nidra that I particularly loved, and that would always be my one. I don't think it was designed to just put you into a state of sleep, but because of my brain's association of that repetition of things, you find a voice that you like and just listen over and over again. The familiarity, maybe it's comfort. That was one of my major strategies.
And just switching off the cogs, which are just turning in our heads, right? That's one of the challenges. We've got to calm the body, you've also got to calm the mind. And sometimes distracting the mind is the best way to calm it. We will all have tricks for the sort of things that we think about to try and calm the mind. Well, the first step is becoming aware that it's running around the mind and worrying or being anxious or thinking about tomorrow or this upset me. Trying to A, recognize that, and then B, distance yourself from it, and then C, distract yourself by thinking about something else that's calming and restful. Another useful strategy when it comes to actually just trying to get to sleep.
Yeah, hugely. And I rely on my breath work. I have certain breath work techniques that are hugely down-regulating. Some of those are on apps that I will listen to other people talking me through breathworks, through meditation. So for me, that's absolutely my tool that I rely on now. I realize that I probably take my supplements too close to sleep time, but because I don't have such a problem inducing sleep now, I don't think it's an issue, but I should probably bring that magnesium earlier. One of the big things, just like you, for me, was just setting that bedtime much, much earlier. So aiming to get into bed. Unfortunately, my children now stay up until about 9:30, but aiming and be ready for bed by 9 o'clock. Because what I realized is I think I have spent my entire life like an overtired child, that I maybe at 7 or 8 o'clock in the evening, instead of listening to my body and allowing myself to start to wind down, I'd push myself over that point of tiredness and I would always stay awake. And I worked with the US time zones for a long, long time. And particularly in 2020, when I was first getting sick, I was running a road trip across the US. So I would be up till 2 a.m. working. This was probably one of the most detrimental things for my health, was pushing my body that late and completely overriding it. But I always maintained, I always said, oh, I'm not someone who gets tired. I don't get tired in the evening. I'm so energized in the evening. And in hindsight, I think it was that kind of adrenalized, buzzing energy that's not necessarily healthy. So from what you say as well, I think what's really interesting is that how much we have tuned into what our bodies are actually telling us, what our bodies are actually needing, rather than what our kind of age group, society, lifestyle is.
I used to, for my entire adult life, my bedtime has been getting to bed 11:30-ish, lights out at midnight.
Same.
And sometimes if it be 1, if it be 2, that's fine. You know,
fine.
you try, yeah. It's fine. And that was through 2020. That pattern continued because you have no reason to realize it should. And then I started to just the sheer exhaustion. And then when I did a little bit of research and found out what the symptoms of a lack of deep sleep or also the slow wave sleep are. And I was like, oh my God, boom, 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 boom. Yes, a lot of them have crossover with long COVID, but they're all basically, they will turbocharge your long COVID if you're not getting enough deep sleep. One of the most effective ways to get more deep sleep is just to go to bed earlier. It's that old, slightly hokey wives' tale of the hours before midnight are worth twice as many as the hours afterwards. And that's a reflection of actually where the deep sleep happens and how you increase the amount of time you spend in deep sleep. So once I made that change, immediately helped hugely to my daily function and my symptom burden.
Yeah. And it is that whole chicken and egg thing of trying to write some things. And I agree. At points, I used to think, well, maybe this is not long COVID. Maybe this is just the result of chronic sleep deprivation. But the chronic sleep deprivation was definitely triggered by all of the symptoms. So it's just trying to deal with everything at the same time, trying to somehow dampen everything to move yourself to a better place. Now, in the interview, Joffe gave some advice for coenzyme Q10, oxaloacetate, creatine, chrysin, glycine. He did not go into much detail about those. When I started researching them, I thought, oh, Jez, this is a whole episode for us. There is so much in this. Do you want to give me one sentence on them?
I might give you two quick ones. Let's start with glycine. It's a simple amino acid that acts as both a building block for proteins and a neurotransmission in the brain. For sleep, it appears to work by lowering core body temperature and calming brain activity. Studies suggest that taking 3 grams before bed may help you fall asleep faster, achieve deeper sleep, and feel more rested the next day. It's considered very safe with minimal side effects. So, as soon as I heard Joffe talk about it and then looked it up, I immediately ordered some from Amazon.
Did you?
I'm on the train already. One thing I have not ordered yet, though, is chrysin, which is a naturally occurring flavonoid found in passion flower, honey, and propolis. It's thought to promote sleep by binding to the same brain receptors as benzodiazepines. However, the evidence for chrysin is much weaker than for glycine, and the main challenge is that it has very poor bioavailability when taken orally. That basically means that when you eat it and digest it, it doesn't necessarily go into the right places that it would in the cells that you need it to. So I haven't yet ordered chrysin, but who knows? It might be worth a punt.
Okay. And I will tell you about creatine monohydrate. It's the compound made from 3 amino acids that is actually typically, I think a lot of us would consider it to be something that's taken by kind of gym bros, but it is pushed massively in the media at the moment, particularly for women in perimenopause. And it plays back into what we talked to Davenport about and what Joffe references in this interview. It enhances energy production. It assists with oxidative phosphorylation and it helps to replenish the ATP. Now, that is why it is used by people who are doing a lot of sports, and that is why it is this kind of performance enhancer in sports. There are now a lot of studies to suggest that the way that it increases energy in your body, it also operates on the nervous system and brain in the same way to boost your energy, maintain your pH levels, and it can definitely help with brain fog. There are studies to show that it increases sleep duration and it can help a lot in major sleep deprivation. But from what I read, it suggests that it is more to do with the fact that it makes you more energized in the day than necessarily enhances the quality of your sleep. But it's such an interesting one that I would like to dig into it in more detail at a later date. I think the thing with that, with the chrysin, glycine, is that they all are well tolerated and generally considered safe. The other 2 that he mentioned is oxaloacetate, which I think trade name is Medinger. And again, that plays into the Krebs cycle, into the energy production. Oxaloacetate is something that is part of that whole process in our bodies. It is innately in our bodies. And studies show that oxaloacetate is significantly lower in the plasma of MECFS patients. There has been the REGAIN study from the NIH really dug into it, and it definitely shows improved sleep as a reported benefit. And I think, again, the sleep quality is improved by the regulation of the metabolic processes rather than anything else. So it's the metabolic processes in the day, but in your body and brain generally, that are improved by it. And the final one that I'll just touch on is coenzyme Q10. And a lot of people have been recommended it. It is an antioxidant that protects the cells. There are trials to suggest that it does help with sleep. It's super interesting. I have started taking creatine only about a month ago. And look, I feel good, but I can't say that it's to do with the creatine.
This is one of the challenges with all the anecdotal stories of people taking supplements that you'll see on social media. I took supplement X and immediately it was great, or I took supplement Y and it wiped me out. Even assuming that there are no changes to your daily patterns or what you eat or what you drink or what supplements you take or what medications you take or what stress you're under or any of these other influencing factors, it's a relapsing and remitting condition.
Yeah.
Right. So when people are anecdotally saying I did this and felt better, it's so hard, whether it's a medication or a supplement, to know where we're coming from on it and with the anecdotal stories. So you have to be looking towards the studies, but there aren't very many high-powered studies of the sort of supplements we're talking about, especially in the context of long COVID.
And with also the fact that supplements still are not rigorously regulated. So when you are dealing with medical grade melatonin, that is one thing. But the things that we are talking about here are things that are going to be promoted by, and as Joffe said, what did he call them?
Wellness wankers.
He did not use that term. Hopium merchants.
Hopium merchants. There's a lot of that out there. And it's very hard. Almost the entirety of the science in long COVID exists within this middle space between something that's well established and stuff that's obviously complete nonsense. And where you put stuff within that huge spectrum is really tough. And all of these supplements exist in that space. So it's very, very hard to get a clear handle on how effective they might be.
So people do need to do their research into brands and into what testing has been done on anything that they might consider buying. And on the flip side of what you just said, there is also that fact that if people are already in a state of crash, it's that idea that you can't add to your symptom set bucket with a new supplement or drug when you're already in this dysregulated state. It was Melanie Hoppers that was saying to me, you can't add things when you're in that crash because your body is so overloaded already, it doesn't necessarily know what to do with it. So a lot of the time we, in desperation, think, oh, I'm in a horrible state, I'm going to try this. It's also best to try those things when you are in a slightly more stable state as well. Maybe the effects are not necessarily the supplement that you added, but your physical state when you tried it. There is so much grey area in this. I am going to adopt the term regular armamentarium that Joffe used for the supplements and things that I take, but actually I don't take any medication apart from HRT now, but I do think that the progesterone that I take is huge for my sleep because I notice when I don't take my progesterone that I do struggle to sleep. So whilst I think that I'm not actually taking any one drug, perhaps, that might enhance my sleep, I'll probably find that the hormones that I take have had a huge impact on my sleep. But that is a whole subject for another episode. Jez, thank you so much for joining me today. I'd love to hear from people. I would like to know if Jez and I breaking things down in this way, talking about these subjects is helpful to you and if you are enjoying this more personalized approach to it. Jez, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you for having me. See you next time.
See you next time. Thank you for listening to Make Visible. Please do like, follow, or subscribe to listen to our next episode where we'll be uncovering more insights into complex chronic illness. This was brought to you by the team at Visible, a group of scientists and engineers whose lives have been affected by energy-limiting health conditions. We're building wearable technology that's helping 100,000 people measure and manage their complex chronic illness. To find out more about what we're working on and how Visible could help you, visit our website at makevisible.com.